welcome to the Dyslexia Life Hacker Show. I'm your host, Matthew Head, and in this episode, I'm talking to Neil Jones. He's a coach for Neil Jones Coaching, which he's been doing for well over 24 years. He specialises in working with companies to provide guidance to improving their mental health culture. He's a trained psychologist and a chartered HR professional, and has worked with lots and lots of different industries. As always, I'll put links to Neil and other things we talk about in the show notes, which will be available at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. Welcome to the show, Neil.
Thank you very much, Matthew. It's nice to be here.
No problem at all. Where I thought I'd kick today's show off with is your interest in psychology. All them years ago, back in the 80s, what got you into thinking a psychology degree would be the thing you wanted to do?
Ooh, that story actually starts a lot earlier.
Okay, cool.
It starts actually with school. Back in 1970, I was diagnosed with dyslexia.
Yeah.
Up until then, I'd been the clever kid who was lazy, and the standard practice was to bully children in those days to get them to work.
Oh, yeah, because that works, doesn't it?
It didn't with me. I'm a very, very determined little soul. But once they'd found I was a dyslexic, they didn't know what to do. They had no idea in those days. So they shunted me into a corner and left me to make my own way in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I worked through O levels with some retakes. And during the A levels, I decided it wasn't going anywhere for me. So I dropped out of school. I went out into the world and did some very interesting jobs. I worked in ship insurance.
Okay.
Until a world shipping slump made me redundant.
Ah.
And then got into management accounting and ended up actually as financial director to a small paper mill in the northeast of England. We joined the EU, and the head office in Canada decided to close down the paper mill in the northeast of England because they had excess capacity across the rest of Europe, and they could now legally import paper into Britain without any tariffs. So I was made redundant and decided to review my life.
Okay, fair enough.
The decision was I wanted to get the degree I'd missed out on. I was going to do a degree in economics. I did an A-level in economics at evening classes and walked it in a year. I then did a second degree out of curiosity, which was psychology, and became addicted. So my degree turned into initially a joint politics psychology degree and then a postgrad in psychology.
Oh.
And I've loved playing with people ever since. My passion is helping people.
Yeah.
My problem is getting them to pay me for the privilege.
Yes. That is always sometimes the tricky way of doing it. One thing a bit my interest really is that you found out your dyslexia in the 70s. Now, yeah, I'll say it again. You found out you were dyslexic in the 70s. Now, that would have been a very rare thing to do. So what do you think led up to people realizing you were dyslexic at that point in time? How did they these rare people that were being aware of it at that point in time going, hang on, Neil's probably showing these traits?
It wasn't that Neil was a dyslexic. It was, I had a change of housemaster, and I went from a housemaster who was very combative to one that was, he was actually the religious teacher as well. So he was much more empathic in the way he handled kids. And he arranged for me to have a couple of visits to the educational psychology team to see what was going on. Not necessarily dyslexia, but this is a brilliant kid who isn't delivering what's going on. And during that, they came up with the fact that I was dyslexic. Of course, in those days, they didn't call it dyslexia. They called it congenital word blindness. That word congenital was a bit of a killer, but I was sworn to secrecy by my parents and got on with life.
Oh, I see. So they go, hey, you've got congenital word blindness, which is going to be a hard one for me to say. And that was it. Just, right, well, don't tell anybody. Let's crack on with it. Why do you think that was the case?
So little was known. I mean, it was 2 years after I was diagnosed, they renamed it dyslexia. And it was only then that people started looking at what can we do? You know, it was shame. He'll do something with his life, but we've got no idea how to help him, was the attitude at the time. The reason I was sworn to secrecy was because the bullying in school on that word congenital would have been intense.
Oh, I can only imagine. Yeah. Yes, that's a word that a bully would love, to get their grubby mitts on. And
I had two of them after me anyway. They'd have made a meal of me otherwise.
Yeah. School's a lovely place, isn't it, I think?
There was good and bad in it, like everything else.
Yeah, definitely. So fast forwarding on to your degree time. By that point, some time has passed. You said about having a dabble in the workplace before you went back to university. Had much changed in terms of how you felt about your dyslexia and what you set up before you embarked on this endeavor?
I had solved some of the puzzles for myself.
Oh, okay, cool.
At the age of 10, I'd been bullied and beaten by some kids that actually used sticks. And my mother decided this was never going to happen again.
Oh, yeah.
So she got me into judo classes.
That worked? Yeah.
Yeah, it worked very well. And I became fascinated by Japanese culture. I wanted to be good at judo, and they did Zen. Or at least that's what I thought at the time. Actually, a lot of them do. And so I got into Zen and Zen meditation. And I found that the Zen meditation I was doing 20 minutes a night, every night before I went to sleep.
Oh, wow.
Really made a powerful difference. It helped me focus more effectively in the world. And I slowed myself down to write faster.
Yeah.
Because one of the weird things about dyslexia is that the brain runs much faster than the hand can operate.
Yeah, guilty charged.
And this Zen meditation kept me more in step with myself.
And you found that it improved your sort of brain to hand, brain to page coordination.
Yeah. By the time I got to doing the degree, I was writing and handwriting all my assignments. And because it was an arts degree, there was an awful lot of writing.
Yeah, imagine.
But, I would write 3 versions and then combine them into one.
Okay.
Because I didn't trust the dyslexia side. I didn't fully trust anything I could write once. On the other hand, I was scoring very well with the work I was producing. And the Zen was allowing me to survive with far less sleep than I would otherwise have had.
Really?
Because when I do sleep, if you do Zen meditation, when you do sleep, you go very, very deep.
Oh, interesting.
And it's the depth of the sleep is actually more important than the length of it.
Yes, you're talking about getting into the REM sleep.
Yes. The ultradian rhythms.
So you're able to, the Zen not only slowed your brain down to increase that, but also improved your sleep. Because I become more and more of a dyslexic person the more tired I am.
Indeed.
So you're finding that you could do 5 hours worth of sleep, but that was more like 8 hours before you'd started the meditation practice. Is that where you?
Yeah, and the other weird thing, when my head hit the pillow, instantly asleep. No one lying around for 10 minutes waiting for it to happen. And when I woke up, I was 100% awake.
Wow.
During the degree, I discovered just how powerfully the Zen was affecting me.
Yeah.
In my second year, I was grabbed by one of my lecturers and dragged in front of a first-year class. Literally walking past the classroom, he said, "Oh, great, you'll do," and dragged me in.
You didn't feel like doing one of the judo flips on him then?
He was a big lad, so I didn't really think of it at the time. But he wanted to demonstrate the mind-body connection to the first years. And he wired me up to a heart rate monitor. I'm sitting picture this if you can, I'm sitting in a smallish room with 40 students in the middle of winter. So I had several layers of clothes on, all of them pulled out of the way so he could stick a heart rate monitor on my bare chest. In terms of embarrassment, it was a killer.
Yeah, definitely.
But he then said to me, "All I want you to do is relax." So I relaxed. I went into my Zen meditation cycle. And a few moments later, for me, I came out of it. And the class was shocked. And he was saying, "You had them scared."
Right.
Because the heart rate monitor had gone down to 0. It was counting the number of beats in 5 seconds and calculating the number of beats per minute. And for longer than 5 seconds, my heart didn't beat. I had slowed my body and my mind down so much, dropping it almost instantly into that state and then rising back out of it again. And that was 13 years of 20 minutes a night Zen meditation.
Blimey.
Yeah, it blew my mind as well at the time. So what? But this again, it's how much you can slow your mind and body down and reconnect it all.
Yeah. And how do you get into go mode? So you go slow yourself right down, the Zen drops the heart rate, you can pull yourself back out of it. But if you need the intensity or the relentlessness, is there something else, or have you got a completely different methodology for that?
Have you heard of the flow state?
Yes.
If you practice Zen regularly enough, you live permanently in that flow state.
Right. Okay.
So that is your absolute maximum go state all the time.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, I see. And is it something you're still practicing today?
Not as much. Marriage got in the way because my wife objected to me meditating immediately before going to bed, especially when we were newly married. You can imagine it got in the way of other things.
I could imagine it might be a limitation to something else that might be more appealing at that time as a new marriage.
But yeah, and I do still do it. I teach other people it. It's a very simple, basic process. It's just the determination to do it. And the weirdest thing is when you get into that state, life just works. All of life just works because you're permanently in flow state and you and the universe seem to be in step.
Yeah, I could see why that would work. And it's an interesting point you brought back to with the dyslexic mind running too fast for like the motorway in your head, but it's a B road out to a bit of paper or to a keyboard or whatever you're using to get something out of it. Even your mouth, sometimes you have to remember to talk slower than you really should be doing.
Yeah.
But I could see using that kind of practice and Eastern practice to claim some more control, maybe.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It calms the mind. It gets rid of the peripheral noise.
Mm.
You know, you become, just like I say, into a flow state, far more focused.
Yeah, I can see that. And
that can bring all sorts of benefit. I got into rally driving at one point.
Oh, like you do.
Because of flow state, where everything, it doesn't matter what the car's doing, you're just one with the car.
Yes. Having watched I used to watch Colin McRae as a kid. So, yeah, where he just looks like the car's floating underneath him until he rolls it. But
I learned to drive with a guy who had an 8-track in his car.
Right, okay.
One of these old 8-track cassette players. And he had 3 separate cassettes to put in. There was one when for when the driving was bad. There was one for when the driving was good.
So you obviously got your psychology degree and you fell in love with psychology. Now that would start driving you down different career paths. So what sort of options did you explore outside once you'd finished university and were looking to go back into the world of work?
Okay, the bachelor's degree was a combined arts degree, politics, psychology, and war and conflict studies. Somewhere along the way, I got headhunted by NATO to be an analyst for them in SHAPE headquarters in Brussels. One of the lecturers was a talent scout. He pointed 2 of us in that direction from my year. But I decided I didn't want to go down that road. I wanted to be a psychologist. When I graduated, I then did a postgrad qualification, so I qualified legally as a psychologist and worked in an urban adventure sports centre with special needs kids.
Okay, yeah.
This was the late 80s when adventure sports with special needs kids, particularly some of the more extreme special needs kids, was something nobody had ever done. And the centre I worked in, we took kids in wheelchairs abseiling. We had to invent the way to run an abseil with wheelchairs.
Yes, yeah.
We took cerebral palsy kids skiing in Scotland. We never left the car park. The cerebral palsy kids couldn't make enough body heat to survive in sub-zero temperatures. So we had to have the minibus parked next to them with its engine constantly running so we could warm them up all the time. And it was 2 kids outside, 6 inside, 20 minutes out, then the next one's 20 minutes out, the next one's 20 minutes out. We ran between 2 car park levels. One was slightly higher than the other, so we used the surface road as a ski run. And over the weekend, the kids learned to snowplow stop and snowplow turn. Once they started moving, they would run as far into the bottom car park as they possibly could before we could drag them back. And of course, we were manhandling everything back up the slope. It was only about 5 or 10 meters, but manhandling them back up the slope to again do it again. So,
Yeah, in cold weather and sleeping conditions, I imagine that was exhausting.
By then, we were fairly fit and used to it. I mean, doing adventure sports 6-7 days a week, because your hobby is adventure sports and your job is adventure sports. And I became a canoeist, a rock climber, a mountaineer, a caver, together with orienteering and all the rest of it. I just could keep going from morning till night. It amazed me these days how much I was doing in those days, because I was starting at 8 in the morning and finishing 9, 10 at night and doing all these very physically demanding things.
Yeah.
It was the worst paid, best job I've ever had.
Blimey.
I'd met a girl at university, so I wanted to go and get married. She was working down here in Lincoln, where I am these days. So I moved down to Lincoln and moved into running youth training for special needs instead. And I did that for about 3.5 years. It was a great job. I was better paid for one thing, but making a real difference for people's lives. That was where I started to develop my coaching skills.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would have to coach the client to hold the job, and at the same time coach the employer who willingly taken on somebody they knew was going to be a problem, so that they could help them keep the job.
Yes, I see. Okay, yeah.
It was constantly juggling. On one or two occasions, there'd be a phone call at 10 to 5 at night saying, so-and-so's had a panic attack or whatever, can you come and help? And I'd have to drive out to site and do all the necessary work, and then coach the employer afterwards how to manage the panic attacks and how to minimize the triggering of them, things like that.
Yeah, of course, yes, because you got all the other factors to build into it.
Yeah. Like I say, it was a great job till the government pulled the money.
That's always annoying.
Don't you love governments?
Yeah. Sometimes pulling money is annoying.
Yeah. Round about that time, my wife was made redundant. She was designing medium-sized gas turbines here in Lincoln for a company then called Rustons. These days, it's part of Siemens, but they still work there. And out of a joke, she applied for a job in Switzerland and got offered 2 jobs, twice the salary.
Oh, that's handy.
So the next thing we did was move to Switzerland.
Oh, wow. Cool.
For a guy who was into mountaineering, my intention was she was going to work and I was going to be a ski bum. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out like that.
I see. Life had other plans.
It did. And again, they were fascinating. I wasn't legally allowed to be a psychologist in Switzerland because I wasn't Swiss qualified.
Oh, right.
And I didn't have the 200,000 Swiss francs in 5 years to invest in requalifying.
Yes.
So I became English teacher to business people.
Yeah.
Which took me into all sorts of fascinating places. I have been in the hot zone of a nuclear reactor, not when it was on, I stress. I don't glow in the dark.
I was just saying, you haven't got a glow. No.
No, but all regulations across the planet for nuclear reactors are only written in English.
Yes, yeah.
And I would go in and work with the senior management team to maintain and improve their English. I was there once a week. And then one day I got a phone call from their safety man saying, do you want a free lunch?
Okay.
Yeah, we both know there is no such thing. But I turned up and went through the security checks and all the rest of it, because it's all sorts of weird, wonderful security processes to get into the inside of the compounds. And he met me and said, oh, great, and led me straight into the reactor building. We stripped naked.
Yeah.
Got completely dressed in orange clothes, walked up to a wall where you stepped over into a pair of shoes that never crossed that wall.
Yeah.
And then through a whole body scanner into the nuclear plant itself. We went and saw the control rooms. He showed me the tanks with the rods in the bottom, all glowing blue around them. And then we went into the main reactor building. Have you ever been under St. Paul's Dome?
Yes.
Imagine a building that big on the inside, a machine about the size of a double-decker bus in the middle, because that was the reactor. They were busy servicing it at the time to make it more efficient.
Okay.
But yeah, that was it, the containment. And that was one of 3 concrete domes to contain any possible explosions. Actually, the outer one was to stop aeroplanes crashing into it and doing damage, because it was on the direct flight path for Zurich.
Right, yes.
Went round the rest, the steam raising and all the rest of it, and finished at the cafeteria for lunch, where he apologized he wasn't allowed to serve wine because there wasn't allowed alcohol on site.
That kind of makes sense in a nuclear reactor. I feel like you probably should want alcohol.
It's unusual in Switzerland.
Oh, really?
Even the local McDonald's sells beer, which is, yeah, it's a wonderful country in many ways. Some of them quite crazy. But yeah, and at the end he explained that he had to do this tour in English with people from time to time. And he'd been using me as a free lesson in return for the lunch.
Fair enough.
As people do.
Yeah.
So that was great. I got to see the CERN Hadron Collider, because my wife, being a mechanical engineer, got a trip out there, and I went along as an also ran. I got to work with Silicon Valley online, designing and delivering training courses. I got to work with Google Earth, where they were integrating autistic and Asperger's into Google Earth in Zurich. I've done things with Swiss bankers, burnout and burnout avoidance. I worked at everything from penniless students to Silicon Valley over the 16 years I was in Switzerland. My wife was headhunted by the company that originally made her redundant, so it was why we ended up back in Lincoln.
No. Oh, the joy to be headhunted. So at some point, I assume when you were in Switzerland, you got really into the mental health side of everything. What sort of catalyzed you to sort of lean in that direction?
It started working with people with burnout.
Yeah, okay.
I was a phone call from a distraught mother. Her son, who was doing a master's degree in genetics, had burnt out. He'd spent the last 6 months of his course sitting in front of his computer in his room playing computer games.
Yeah.
The only time he'd gone outside that room was to shop or cook food. He didn't get any interaction with any of the other students or any of his lecturers or anything else. So I built a relationship with him and persuaded him to slowly rebuild his life outside the room. I taught him the meditation I was talking about earlier. And over the next 2 years of intermittently coaching him, we got him into a separate master's degree that better suited him, a master's degree in biomolecular archaeology.
Blimey, that sounds fancy.
That started actually with a New Year's party with friends who owned a bar in Zurich. And we met this woman who had this cool job description. She had a PhD in biomolecular archaeology. She was lecturing at the local university. And this is using genetics to research how populations change over time.
Mm-hmm.
So I introduced the two of them and supported him while he talked himself into a course. He had a wonderful time doing the course. He went off to Transylvania at one point and did some physical archaeology at Vlad's castle. So, it was all that sort of thing. His mother was an archaeologist anyway, so she was happy. And he was using his genetic skills, so he was happy. And the targets we had set at the beginning, the outcomes did he want? We hit every single one of them.
Brilliant.
There was one point where he was telling me a silly story about how he'd had to go to a party and he hadn't read the invitation properly and he'd gone to the wrong place for the party. And my first question was, when did you stop meditating?
Okay.
Because if he'd been meditating, he admitted, 3 months before he'd sort of stopped it. Everything's fine now. I don't need to do this anymore. We all do from time to time.
Yeah.
And I knew instantly he would not have made that mistake of going to the wrong place if he was still meditating. He'd have just been so focused, he'd have automatically gone to the right place.
So if you're dealing with somebody who's getting close to burnout, I guess that this particular individual already had, but what are the signs that if somebody's listening and they feel like they're getting towards that way, or, everybody has busy jobs and busy lives, and sometimes, things are tricky, but what actually starts tipping people over into, actually, this is becoming more like full-on burnout?
The first thing I look for is somebody to don't have enough time.
Yeah.
Because, we talk about stress and talking about the stress in their work and all the rest of it. Well, 10 minutes meditation at the end of the night. Oh, I don't have the time.
Yes.
And that's telling me they're on the rim of burnout.
Okay.
And it's such a silly thing, but it's always the answer I get to them, that they start thinking two things. One, nobody can do it but me. And two, I don't have the time to do anything except I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And burnout from there depends on how they fall. It can be simply you need 3 weeks holiday rest. But it's tunnel vision and the absolute conviction that you're never going to have enough time. And if you're feeling either of those, talk to somebody like me. And if you're feeling both of them, grab them firmly in your hands and don't let go till they've sorted you out.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. And is it mostly burnout or the prevention of burnout that you focus on with the sort of mental health piece that you tend to focus your work on now?
I talk these days about mental fitness, not mental health.
Okay, yeah. And the difference being?
This grew out of a conversation I was having with a retired American football player. He's a business coach in America these days, and we do some work together from time to time. And we started with a conversation around health and fitness. And he said, for him, health is what you feel when you're not feeling ill. Fitness is something you work on with purpose. And you can particularly understand that for a professional sports person.
Yes. Yeah.
Fitness is about earning a living. It's more than just jogging around the park at the end of a day or something. We then got into mental health and mental fitness and came to similar conclusions. Mental health is what you feel when you're not aware of having any issues.
Mm.
Mental fitness will be something you work on with purpose. That can be something as simple as mastering your sleep patterns.
Yeah.
It can be something much, much more profound. You know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that pyramid shape.
Yeah. Yes.
If you look at them, the bottom two layers are to do with physical survival.
Yes.
The middle two layers are to do with emotional survival, making connections with people and society and all the rest of it.
Mm.
The top two layers are to do with mental fitness. And at the very pinnacle these days, they put spiritual fitness, spiritual health.
Mm. Mm.
And it's those top two layers that I help people work through. And the further they want to go, the higher I can lift them up to that point of spirituality.
Okay. And obviously, you said meditation, as you said, with the first person burnout comes in. But what sort of other techniques are you employing to help people with their mental fitness?
Depends what they want out of it. Do you want to be more creative? It's not you literally, but this is a sort of question.
Yeah.
Would you like to be more creative? Did you realize that there's a strong evidence in psychology that we're taught to be uncreative? There was research done in the 60s by a guy called Land. He's a scientist. He was employed by NASA to help them find geniuses to employ in NASA.
Mm-hmm.
And he started off looking at what it meant to be a genius, and it was to do with being creative and original in the way you solve problems.
Yes.
And he looked at 5-year-olds and found that 98% of those children were genius level creativity and problem solving skills.
Yes.
And then he looked at them at 10, and there was 28% had genius level problem solving skills. And when he got to the teenagers, they were down to 13%. And when he got to adults, it was 2%. And he came to the conclusion that education is the thing that stops us being genius creatives.
Yes. Yeah, I've heard that before.
So to help people recover their creativity is to help them rediscover the child in them.
Yeah.
To go out and play in the original sense of the word. And I find actually I help people with other issues by getting them out into woodlands to play like a child.
Yeah.
The Japanese have a concept called Shinrin-yoku, and it translates as forest bathing. Basic is to go walk around a woodland like you were a 4-year-old discovering things for the first time. It's not just having a walk in the woods. It's engaging as fully as possible with the environment. And it's amazing how powerful that is at healing all sorts of mental health issues in people. Indeed, before we started this, we were talking about the analog mind, how the brain is an analog computer, and it's an analog world. And that interconnection, we lose it over time. Indeed, education detaches us from the analog connections between the world and our mind, which 5-year-olds have. And by taking you back there and reintroducing that analog element into your daily life, you recover not only your mental health, but you will recover creativity as well.
It makes sense. And I've heard that before with, creativity, because school is about, structured and about conforming and getting through exams and stuff, and it does take it away. Yeah. And if you're after being more creative, I guess you are trying to unwind some of that programming, so to speak.
Without doubt. If you want to be more resilient in the world, the tools are the same. It's like you're an engineer. You can use the same tools to make different machines.
Yes.
I use the same sort of tool sets to help people achieve different ends.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you find there's any difference when you're dealing with somebody who's neurodiverse versus somebody who's neurotypical, particularly sort of somebody, if you've got a fellow dyslexic on the other side of coaching call or meeting?
Yes. I actually find neurodiverse people are more open to what I have to say.
Okay.
The neurotypical tend to think they know what they're doing.
Right. I see.
Now, I'm all right because I'm neurotypical. No, hang on a minute. Let's start working through this and seeing just how neurotypical you are, because very few of us are really. Everything's a spectrum.
Yeah.
Indeed, 2 tests I tend to put people through. One is the introvert-extrovert test, because a lot of introverts don't think they are. They pretend to well. And the other one I came up with is just a crude but very effective test for how much of a psychopath you are.
Right. Are people always surprised at the answer?
The number of people who won't let me know what the results are on their test. These are all designed to be self-scoring. If you want to talk to me about it afterwards, that's fine. But just so you know, I do the psychopath one, particularly when I'm doing stress courses.
Oh, okay.
Because psychopaths are stress immune.
Right.
And if you are somebody who's sensitive to stress, finding the psychopath in you can help you be less affected by stress. Stress for a psychopath is like water off a duck's back.
Yeah.
It's there in the moment and then it's gone.
Yes.
It's not that they don't feel stress, it's they don't carry it afterwards.
Yeah, yes. They're not sat there getting home from work and taking another hour and a half to come back down to baseline.
Or drinking themselves stupid or whatever, yes.
Yes, yeah. Self-medicating as well, or doing some other destructive behaviour, yes.
Yes, something to numb it rather than fix it.
Yes, yeah. A temporary reprieve. Have you had some people that I'd be fascinated if somebody did their psychopath test went, the score's lower than I expected.
The weird thing, one weird story, we had problems with bankers.
Yes.
At one point.
Yeah.
The banking profession had come up with a test to decide whether or not to recruit people. And they were wanting to recruit people with fairly high psychopathy levels.
Right.
Because they would be the animals in the marketplace, the ones who drive the profits and all the rest of it. I can understand all that.
Yeah, I could see the thinking.
But the one of the interview questions they had was, you're driving through a rainy night past a bus stop, and at the bus stop is an old woman who needs to go to hospital, the love of your life, and your best friend. What do you do? And the answer they were looking for is, I stop long enough to pick up the love of my life and go on my way. The answer they should have been looking for is, I stop, hand the keys of the car to my best friend to take the old lady to hospital while I sit in the bus stop with the love of my life. They're both psychopaths, but one's a socialized psychopath. They understand their connection with the wider world. And the other is a selfish psychopath. And the selfish psychopath isn't the one you want running your life.
Right, yes. No, I could see that. I could see that being a huge problem. Being a selfish version of that would be not very good for life or for banking.
Well, somebody let them run amok after they recruited them instead of managing them properly.
You're saying sort of dyslexics are more open to, or neurodiverse are more open to what you have to say, which is really interesting, because it doesn't matter which individuals come to you. They come to you, so you think they want a list of what you have to say, and they're paying you money for this as well, which normally motivates people to pay attention.
Do you speak German?
9.
I'll teach you my favorite word of German. It's Jein.
Right.
That's ja and nein, yes and no in one word.
What do you use that for?
You go back to the 70s, a business consultant, Edward de Bono, used to argue we needed this in the English language anyway. People will come to me to not do anything about something. There was, again, going back to the 60s, there was a medical doctor who wrote one of the textbooks of psychology back then. It's Dr. Eric Berne, and he wrote a book called The Games People Play. And these are things people do to not make a difference in the world. And one of the games people play, he called therapy.
Yes.
And they would go to therapy for years in order to go through the rituals without making any difference, because that showed the rest of the world they were trying to make a difference.
Right, yeah.
Indeed, yes.
Yes, like weaponized incompetence, yes.
So, even if somebody comes to me and pays me lots of money, they still don't necessarily want to make a difference. And I love those people. I make lots and lots of money for years and years and years. And I don't have to work hard at it, because I know they're not going to work hard at it. I've just got to work hard enough to keep them occupied for half an hour or whatever.
Do you ever call them on it, out of curiosity?
I will challenge them at various points to see if they change their minds.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I get bored with working with the same person for a long time.
No, I could understand that, yeah.
One of the things dyslexics have is that a need for sparkly things.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Shiny thing syndrome.
And if I've got the same person going over to, yeah, it's great. I've got all this money, but I'm bored with you. Fix yourself so I can get on with somebody else.
Yeah. And it's to a more serious note, it's also taking time up that you could be helping somebody who would be more interested in doing the work.
If I find that I have somebody who is not working with me and I'm getting requests from people to take that time from them, I will do it.
Yeah.
Like I said originally, my passion in life is helping people.
Yeah.
I've been doing that for actually 30 odd years now.
Yeah.
In various forms, ever since the adventure sports.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I can help somebody, I will. An awful lot of people, I offer everybody an hour of my life for free.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, that's all they need.
Oh, okay.
It's just getting them started on a new track and giving them a few tools for themselves to work with it. Like if I was teaching you the basics of meditation, I can do that inside an hour and set you on doing it 10 minutes a night, every night before you go to sleep, or every day at some point when you lock yourself into a quiet room where you do that. And as long as you're doing that, you don't need a lot else from me, because that will, over time, fix the other issues for you.
Yeah, I could see the thinking.
It's kicking a self-repair process in place.
Yeah, it's sort of like a keystone habit, really.
Yeah.
So how else do you think dyslexics and neurodiverse are slightly different to a neurotypical, except for the fact they're more open to what you've got to say? Is there any other sort of traits you kind of notice very interesting, or sort of particularly on the mental health side?
The key to a mental health work is to build a rapport with the person.
Yeah.
And neurodiverse people are a bigger challenge when it comes to establishing the rapport.
Really?
Particularly some on the more extreme ends of autism.
Ah, yes, yeah.
They can be, it's my way or no way.
Yep.
And you've got to be 100% in step with them. You can't persuade them to be in step with you. Where with other forms of neurodiverse people, I can get them to be in step with me, or we can meet somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it was my ability to build rapport that got me the job with Google Earth.
Ah, of course, yes. I see. So yeah, you can.
I accidentally bumped into a gang of neurodiverse people up in the mountains, and they were being followed by somebody. And I'm fairly sensitive to these sort of things. I could, they walked past me, and then this guy walked past me 4 or 5 times in the day. And at the end of the day, I was standing next to them, and one guy had a Google rucksack on his back. And I just stood next to him. And this sounds weird to somebody who has never experienced it, but I simply breathed my way into his life.
Right.
People who've worked with neurodiverse people for a long time understand this. I know I have an associate here in Lincoln who just works with autistic people, and he fully understood that the first time I said it.
Okay.
And it's the way you breathe. You synchronize your breathing with theirs, and that then helps you get into step with them. And he turned and spoke to me. And this guy who was following, he was a psychologist keeping half an eye on them, started initially taking photographs and then videoing what was going on.
Yeah.
And I realized, obviously, he was watching these people in some way. I'd identified them as a mixture of Asperger's and autistics. And behavior is just so radically different in some of them. You can't mistake it. And so as he was leaving we were going down in a cable car. As he's leaving the cable car, I handed him my visitor's card, because everybody in Switzerland has a visitor's card, not a business card. It's your personal visitor's card. And I handed him my visitor's card and said, "Contact me, we need to talk." And we had some chats, and I chat to some of the others, and then they brought me in to assist their managers in managing these people. Because Google is an extrovert company. It is crazily extrovert. If you're not an extrovert, you find it very uncomfortable to work there.
Yeah, I could see it being like that, yeah.
Particularly autistics. You cannot hot desk an autistic person.
No.
They have to have everything just so all the time. It has to be their absolute undisputed space. So teaching managers who are very extrovert and, hey, I work here today and there tomorrow and hang from the ceiling and literally take the slide down to the refectory and all the rest of it. It was utterly alien for them. So teaching them how to work with these people, and I got involved.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that being an introvert and an extroverted company must be
I did it with a company down in Cambridgeshire. They were a specialist in, and they were helping companies protect their intellectual property.
Yeah.
And the front of house people were extroverts going out there, talking their way into businesses and all the rest of it. And the back of house people were all introverts.
Yeah.
Some of them with examples of Asperger's and autism in them, because that's the sort of environment they tend to gravitate towards. And I helped build the bridge, teaching each half skills that let them communicate effectively with the other.
Yes, and it's important to build the bridges, and also important for people who are in companies that might promote one sort of way of thinking, like the example you said with Google and the extrovert, to understand that you need introverts as part of your team for diversity, and important to build because they bring stuff to the table that you might not think of. And also, how do you make sure your extrovert environment suits people that aren't necessarily into that kind of thing?
It can be a big issue for them.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a really interesting feeling in the gap.
And some companies don't want to know.
No, I could see that. So one thing we were talking about before we got started was that you're working or focusing on digital detox programs at the minute. So, I think digital detoxing is probably something that a lot of us need more of. I must admit, I deleted Instagram about 2 months ago and feel a lot happier because of it, which really, really surprised me at the time. I hadn't realised quite how much of a negative pull it was having on me. So I think most people listening will probably understand what a digital detox is, but why has that really piqued your interest recently?
It started last Christmas.
Okay.
My wife and I were out Christmas shopping, and we went to Burger King for a burger for lunch. And I stood in that hall with all the booths full of people, and it was silent.
Yes.
They were all on screens, even the young kids. When I went to Wimpy or wherever in the past, the kids got something to colour in, and everybody talked about what they were doing in the day. They talked with each other. None of them were talking with each other, the exception of my wife and myself. They were all on screens. And I looked at that and thought just how unhealthy that environment is. Everyone in a little tiny bubble, nobody connecting with anybody else, because you're not really emotionally or spiritually connected with anything except the handset in your hand. And knowing from having worked with the analog world to help heal people just how important that connection with the analog world is, I decided I needed to do something.
Yes.
The problem with social media is that it generates a chemical response in the brain. This dopamine response, which is very important. It kept our ancestors in Stone Age time hunting. It was the aspect of dopamine that kept them going when they were berries or digging roots or hunting prey or whatever it was they were doing, catching fish and so on. And the success was the dopamine kick, which made them come back tomorrow to do it again. And it was deliberately done by various companies. They designed their websites, their apps, their games, constantly trigger another dopamine kick. They designed ideas from the gambling industry. All those bandits, the slot machines, were designed in exactly the same way to, one, keep you hopeful that you're going to win, and two, give you a little payout every so often to keep you in the dopamine, to keep you coming back to put more money in. It's exactly the same process. And in my research, I've found there's lots of people arguing about having a dopamine detox.
Yes. Yeah.
But that, for me, isn't the right way forward. If you talk to gamblers who also have a dopamine problem, the people who are addicted to gambling, you don't talk about detoxing them from dopamine. You talk about detoxing them from gambling. You detox them from the trigger, not the dopamine, because you can't switch the dopamine off. And that's what I'm looking to do. I'm designing a process that will allow people to re-own their own minds, so that they will, instead of detoxing from the dopamine, which, as I say, is a necessary part of our function as human beings, they will detox from the triggers that have got them hooked to. So you detox from the digital input.
Yeah, I think I can understand that. And I think you are right that it is a constant ping of dopamine and an addictive behavior. And everybody sort of, well, for want of a better phrase, doom scrolls through their phones now, don't they? In terms of, because it's not like the content, some content is positive, but it's quite a lot of it is negative, and quite a lot of it is setting people up against each other and all this kind of stuff. It's not a healthy environment to be in for long hours per day, is it?
And especially not late at night,
Yeah.
People who scroll into 2 a.m. and all the rest of it. Yeah. Get some sleep.
Yes.
I my self-discipline, my phone doesn't sit on my bedside table. It's at the opposite end of the building getting charged every night.
Ah, fair enough.
So it can't even ping at me. Whatever it is, if it bursts into flames, I won't know till the following morning.
Yes. Yeah. And it's important to put phones down late at night. And cool. Okay, so I'm going to start winding the podcast up now. And before I wind the podcast up, there's always 3 rapid fire questions that every guest gets.
Before we get to that, can I just do one other thing? My go-to book on dyslexia, The Dyslexic Advantage, it's now in a 2nd edition. It's that widely used. And I find that is my go-to book. I recommend it for anybody who has a dyslexic child or who is dyslexic, because it's written in plain English. It's very easy to understand, and it helps you understand yourself or helps parents understand their children if there's that sort of problem.
Yes, and I will drop the link to my interview with one of the authors of that book in the show notes, just if you want an introduction into the Dyslexia Advantage. But I've listened to it on Audible, and it's very, very, very good. So each person who comes on the podcast gets 3 rapid-fire questions from me. They do not require rapid-fire answers from yourself. So shall we dive into question number 1? What prejudice about dyslexia have you had that has been proven wrong?
I'm not sure I've experienced a prejudice as such. The only time it ever became an issue was when I was working in the youth training for special needs kids. I actually said in the interview that I was dyslexic. And the boss loved that because it showed she was being diversifying and all the rest of it. It was based in academia. 3 years later, she was trying to get me sacked for not keeping the paper records up to the standard she wanted. And she ran into a brick wall when I said, yes, but you knew I was dyslexic before you employed me.
Oh dear. Right, yes. Which is why sometimes it's handy to mention these things at the beginning of a new job.
Definitely. But yeah, other than that, I've been freelance for so long that I haven't really run into any major problems.
Mm-hmm.
My wife's one joy when I was living and working in Switzerland. She had a dyslexic Geordie teaching English to Swiss people.
That is a funny combination that you've said it. Cool. So, rapid fire question number 2. If an alien landed and you had to describe dyslexia to them, how would you do it?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would explain to them how, when I was a child, it was like reading books through rippling water.
Ah, interesting. That's a fun way of explaining. Not heard something like that before.
I would explain to them how I see the world in such a way that I make connections other people don't. I see patterns other people don't. This was partly why I was suggested during my degree that I go to NATO and be an analyst, because I would see patterns that they don't. Indeed, do you know that dyslexics nowadays are advertised for by GCHQ specifically to see the patterns in data that other people don't?
I am aware of GCHQs. Dyslexics make great spies. Yes.
I've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, broke the mug.
Yeah. And rapid fire question number 3. And seeing as this is the Dyslexia Life Hack show, what is your favorite dyslexic life hack?
Learn to draw.
Really?
Not literally draw, but I got into mind mapping.
Ah, yes. Okay, yeah.
There was a TV series in the 80s by Tony Buzan about mind mapping. And I got into that in a big way, and it helped me so much when I was doing my degree.
Yeah.
Because I could build mind maps rather than have to write masses of notes.
Yeah, very powerful.
Still walk out with all the information I needed from a lecture.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the better the drawing, the easier it is to hook yourself into the mind map.
Cool. Okay, then. So before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to add, and where can people find you?
There's nothing else really to add. I can talk forever, but that's not necessarily useful. And people can find the best place for people to find me is on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Because I don't have a website.
Ah, fair enough. Yes, I had discovered this when I was trying to do some research on you that you don't have a website.
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll drop the LinkedIn link in the show notes for people to come find you. That leaves me to thank you very much for taking the time to come on the show. And I want to thank everybody else for taking the time to listen. And I will speak to you in the next episode. Goodbye for now.